50,000 people lost their lives in Turkey because of a mechanism that's been firing at Earth since before dinosaurs existed. And the twist that'll break your brain is that it's not classified, not hidden, and you literally looked at it today. The conspiracy theorists were right that someone knew. They just accused the janitor when the CEO was standing right there holding a flamethrower. The High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program sits on 33 acres of frozen ground in Gakona, Alaska. 180 cross-dipole antennas pointed at the sky. Its stated purpose is to analyze ionospheric properties, which is a fancy way of saying it watches how the sky reacts when you poke it with radio signals. Think of it as humanity's most expensive game of poke the sky, see what happens. Except instead of a stick, we're using 3.6 megawatts of radio waves, because we're overachievers, and it has absolutely nothing to do with what happened next. But try telling that to 500,000 Twitter bots, who, as we'll discover, have the critical thinking skills of a toaster. The facility was built by the United States Air Force and Navy in the 1990s. And then in August 2015, the military handed the entire operation to the University of Alaska Fairbanks, a public university, which now offers guided tours. You can literally schedule a field trip to the alleged apocalypse machine. They have a gift shop with t-shirts. If this is a top-secret earthquake device, someone really needs to talk to their marketing department. But in late January 2023, something changed. Between January 30th and February 3rd, 9 Western nations closed their consulates in Istanbul. France, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, Belgium, the United Kingdom, Italy, Switzerland, the United States. All of them issued travel warnings citing unspecified security threats. Just synchronized diplomatic evacuations across a 5-day window. 9 countries don't simultaneously close consulates because of a bad weather forecast. This is the geopolitical equivalent of everyone at the party suddenly remembering they have to be somewhere else at the exact same time, which is never a good sign. And then, 36 hours later, a researcher with no seismology credentials posted a prediction that would either make him famous or make him look like the luckiest guesser in human history. On February 4th, 2023, Frank Hugerbeets, a Dutch researcher who studies planetary alignments, posted a public forecast on social media. The text read, "Sooner or later there will be a magnitude 7.5 earthquake in this region." He listed south-central Turkey, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. He did not cite peer-reviewed seismology. He referenced planetary geometry. Astrology for disaster prediction. It's like using your horoscope to predict the stock market. Except this time Mercury wasn't just in retrograde. It was apparently snitching. The scientific community rolled its eyes. The conspiracy community took notes, and then the ground moved. February 6th, 2023, 4:17 a.m. local time. A magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck the East Anatolian Fault at a depth of 18 kilometers. Buildings collapsed in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Entire city blocks pancaked. Over 50,000 people lost their lives. It was the most devastating earthquake in the region in over a century. And here's the part that breaks the timeline. The sky started glowing, and then the ground started moving. In that order. Remember that, because that detail is about to ruin everyone's theory, including yours. Ground-level video recordings from multiple locations captured earthquake lights, illuminating the night sky immediately before the seismic rupture. Brilliant flashes of blue and white, pulsing curtains of light that looked like aurora borealis in the wrong hemisphere. Like nature decided to throw a rave right before the worst day of thousands of people's lives. Witnesses described the sky turning to fire seconds before the shaking began. What everyone agrees on is that the lights happened, and then, at 10:24 a.m., local time, 6 hours and 7 minutes after the first rupture, a second magnitude 7.5 earthquake struck approximately 100 kilometers to the north. 2 massive earthquakes, 6 hours apart, both preceded by glowing skies. And Frank Hugerbeets had called it 36 hours earlier. The conspiracy theorists were having the best day of their lives. The scientific community was having the worst. But here is where the story stops being about prediction and starts being about testimony. Because 2 days later, a Romanian senator stood before parliament and said something that would fuel conspiracy theories for years. On February 8, 2023, Senator Diana Ivanovici Șoșoacă testified before the Romanian parliament. She entered into the official record that 10 Western countries had recalled their ambassadors 24 hours before the earthquake. But then she said something else. She claimed that Turkish gas and oil pipelines were systematically shut down exactly 1 minute before seismographs detected the initial 7.8 magnitude rupture, which is fascinating timing for routine maintenance on a Monday morning at 4:16 a.m. Because nothing says business as usual like shutting down an entire nation's energy infrastructure 60 seconds before the ground decides to become a trampoline. The Romanian government did not contradict her testimony. The Turkish government did not respond. And the conspiracy theorists had their smoking device, or at least what they thought was a smoking device. But here's where the conspiracy hits a physics problem. HAARP transmits at 3.6 megawatts. The Turkey earthquake released energy equivalent to nearly 10,000 Hiroshima explosions simultaneously. So, unless someone in Alaska has been holding down the transmit button since 1723, we might want to revisit our assumptions. The numbers say this is impossible. The timeline says it happened anyway. Welcome to the part where physics and paranoia have a very uncomfortable meeting. And then the bot army arrived. Between February 5th and February 20th, 2023, researchers scraped 507,000 messages propagating the HAARP caused the earthquake narrative. 500,000 messages, 15 days, across 11 monitored languages. Statistical analysis revealed these messages exhibited linguistic parameters consistent with artificial intelligence bot generation. Someone programmed an AI to argue about Alaskan radio antennas in Turkish, Arabic, and Japanese simultaneously, which is either the most dedicated troll in human history or someone with a very specific agenda and a very large server farm. The propagating accounts averaged 8 to 13 posts daily. They were established uniformly around mid-2020. They exhibited specific nano-influencer follower ratios, enough followers to appear legitimate, not enough to attract scrutiny. They did not argue with detractors. They simply repeated the message, adjusted the phrasing slightly, and moved to the next platform, like the world's most annoying game of telephone. Except the phone is a bot, and it never sleeps. 500,000 bot-generated messages, 11 languages, 14 days. Someone wanted this story to spread. Someone with resources, coordination, and apparently zero hobbies. If you want to see more cases where the official story collapses under basic scrutiny, hit subscribe. Because this rabbit hole goes so much deeper and weirder, and honestly, more scientifically terrifying. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, created to stop Soviet tanks, is now fighting Twitter bots about ionosphere research. This is what peak 21st century looks like. We deployed military-grade information warfare protocols to counter bots that were themselves using military-grade information warfare protocols. It's an arms race. Except the mechanisms are Reddit posts and the casualties are brain cells. Which raises an interesting question. Why does a military alliance need automated debunking protocols for a conspiracy theory about a research antenna? If this is nonsense, why are we treating it like an information warfare emergency? The Euro-Mediterranean Seismological Center deployed the last quake bot, an automated system that triggers pre-bunking messages within tens of seconds of global seismic events. Between February 6th and March 1st, the bot sent 410 automated responses. The bot responded faster than human fact-checkers could type, because apparently the best way to fight misinformation is with a robot that argues faster than you can refresh the page. But the bot campaign was not the strangest part. The strangest part was an email sent 12 years earlier that nobody wanted to talk about. And when I say nobody, I mean the State Department treated this thing like it was radioactive. February 21st, 2011. Christchurch, New Zealand. A magnitude 6.3 earthquake struck during lunchtime. 185 people lost their lives. It remains the second most devastating natural disaster in New Zealand history. Hours before the rupture, 9 members of the United States Congress departed Christchurch. Their departure was sudden, their itinerary was altered, and on the day of the earthquake, current National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, then serving as Director of Policy Planning under Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, sent an email. The subject line was blank. The body contained 3 words: and on cue. 9 members of Congress evacuated Christchurch hours before a 6.3 magnitude earthquake, and the future National Security Advisor's only reaction was, "and on cue." Not, "thank goodness they're safe." Not, "what incredible timing." Just, "and on cue," like he was watching a movie he'd already seen. The email was obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests. It was confirmed authentic. The State Department offered no explanation, which is government speak for "please stop asking questions." And this is the part where everything inverts, and I mean everything. Up is down, cats are dogs. The conspiracy theorists were right and wrong simultaneously. The conspiracy was backwards. The signal was real, the pattern was undeniable, but the transmitter was not in Alaska. It was beneath your feet. Literally. Right now, as you're watching this, the planet is screaming. We just forgot to listen. Here's what's actually happening. The Earth's crust emits electromagnetic precursors into the atmosphere before a seismic rupture. Not after, before. The planet broadcasts its own structural failure in advance. It's the world's oldest early warning system. We just never bothered to check the manual. When crustal rocks are subjected to extreme tectonic stress, the molecular bonds within minerals begin to fracture. When these bonds break, they release electronic charge carriers that flow upward through 18 kilometers of rock. The Earth is literally trying to warn us. And while everyone was busy blaming Alaska, the ground was screaming, "Earthquake incoming," in electromagnetic frequencies. These charge carriers migrate toward the Earth's surface. As they move through the crust, they ionize the air at ground level. They generate radio waves, and in some cases they create visible light. The earthquake lights captured on video in Turkey were ionized air molecules emitting photons as the charge reached the surface. The sky was literally screaming in a language we forgot how to speak. But the visible lights are just the surface phenomenon. The real signal propagates upward, into the ionosphere, where things get measurable, and where the entire conspiracy theory flips inside out like a sock. Researchers at Nagoya University in Japan built a reconstruction of the ionosphere using data from over 4,500 satellite receivers. On January 1st, 2024, a magnitude 7.5 earthquake struck the Noto Peninsula in Japan. 10 minutes after the fault ruptured, they watched the ionosphere record the shockwave in real time. But that was not the disturbing part. The disturbing part is what happened before. The disturbances happened before the earthquakes. Days before. The ionosphere was recording a crime that hadn't happened yet. Except it wasn't a crime, it was a confession. An automated disaster warning that has been running for millions of years. On April 25, 2015, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck Nepal. Over 8,800 people lost their lives. But 5 days before the rupture, satellite maps recorded severe electron content anomalies. The ionosphere knew. It recorded the warning, and nobody was watching. 5 days. The Earth gave us 5 days' notice. We did nothing. Because we were too busy arguing about whether Alaska was weaponizing the sky. But here is where the conspiracy gets uncomfortable, because 2 very prominent officials explicitly warned about earthquake devices. They were right. They were just wrong about who built the device. Turns out the device was 4.6 billion years old, and we've been standing on it this entire time. In 1997, United States Secretary of Defense William Cohen stated, "Others are engaging in an eco-type terrorism, whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves." Turns out he was right. There is a mechanism that triggers earthquakes through electromagnetic waves. It is called a tectonic plate under 200 million years of accumulated stress. And it's been armed since before dinosaurs walked the Earth. We just never checked the safety. The satellite data confirms the upper atmosphere was severely disturbed before the earthquakes occurred. The Earth was actively broadcasting its own structural failure days in advance. But if the Earth is the transmitter, that raises an even more uncomfortable question. Why were the HAARP magnetometers picking up the signal so clearly? And why did the spikes happen before every major earthquake in the exact same pattern? And why did nobody notice that HAARP wasn't transmitting? It was receiving? Morocco, September 8th, 2023. Magnitude 6.8. Japan, January 1st, 2024. Magnitude 7.5. Taiwan, April 3rd, 2024. Magnitude 7.4. Turkey, February 6th, 2023. Magnitude 7.8. 4 earthquakes, 4 continents. And in every case, HAARP's induction magnetometers recorded severe high-frequency oscillations in the days preceding the rupture. The magnetometers did not lie. The spikes were real. 4 earthquakes, 4 warnings, perfect correlation. But the transmitter was off. HAARP was not transmitting. It was received. It was the world's most expensive eavesdropping device. And it was listening to the planet have a nervous breakdown. The University of Alaska Fairbanks maintains detailed administrative logs of HAARP's operational status. The transmitter was offline during all 4 earthquake events, which leaves one of 2 possibilities. Either the University of Alaska is lying about their equipment logs, or something else was generating that electromagnetic signature, and the HAARP was just listening. Spoiler, it was option 2. And something else was way scarier than a secret government device. The magnetometers were measuring something real, and the answer was staring at us from 93 million miles away, every single day, for 4.6 billion years, literally in plain sight. We just never looked up. Between 1997 and 2023, researchers compiled a statistical review of the 50 strongest Class X solar flares. When they hit Earth, they compress the magnetosphere, generate geomagnetic storms, and disrupt satellite communications. And apparently, they also trigger earthquakes, because the sun is not just the giver of life, it's also the pusher of tectonic plates. Multitasking at its finest. The statistical analysis showed a 68% increase in earthquakes of magnitude 4.5 or greater within 10 days of the flare's impact, specifically within a 5,000-kilometer radius of the subsolar point, the location on Earth where the sun is directly overhead at the moment of impact. 68% increase, 50 flares, 26 years of data. The sun has been triggering earthquakes this entire time, and we blamed Alaska. We spent decades arguing about a 3-megawatt antenna while ignoring the 1.3 million kilometer wide fusion reactor that's been doing this since before continents existed. Drop your theory in the comments. Because if the sun is triggering the earthquakes, the next question breaks everything we thought we knew about prediction. Class 10 solar flares generate geomagnetic pulsations. These pulsations induce electric currents in the Earth's crust. Scientists call them telluric currents, which sounds way cooler than the sun is electrocuting the ground. The current density is identical to the current density created in the Earth's crust by artificial pulse sources known to initiate earthquakes in highly stressed faults. Identical. The sun is doing naturally what we thought someone was doing artificially, except the sun's been doing it for billions of years and doesn't need a budget. We have been blaming a 3.6 megawatt antenna in Alaska while ignoring the 1.3 million kilometer wide fusion reactor that has been pulsing the ionosphere for 4.6 billion years. If HAARP is a device, the sun is an entire arsenal, and it doesn't care about your conspiracy theories. But the most disturbing confirmation came from a case study. And when I say disturbing, I mean the kind of disturbing that makes you reconsider everything you thought you knew about how the universe works. December 26, 2004, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck off the coast of Sumatra. The resulting tsunami took over 230,000 people across 14 countries. And 3 weeks later, the sun fired. On January 20, 2005, a Class 10.1 solar flare erupted from the sun's surface. It was one of the most powerful flares recorded in the modern era. And 7 days later, the number of aftershocks with magnitudes greater than 2.5 in the Sumatra region increased by a factor of 17. 17 times. Not 17%, 17 times. The sun pressed the earthquake button, and the Earth responded like it was following orders. A 9.1 magnitude earthquake, followed by a Class 10 10.1 solar flare, followed by 17 times more aftershocks. And nobody connected the dots for 2 decades. We were too busy arguing about Alaska to notice the sun was running an entire seismic remote control, but Japan was paying attention. Because, of course, Japan was paying attention. They live on four tectonic plates that are actively trying to destroy each other. Japan deployed a network of 8 very low-frequency and low-frequency receivers specifically designed to monitor pre-seismic criticality in the ionosphere. 3 to 7 days before the 2016 Kumamoto earthquake sequence, the receivers recorded severe signal depression in the lower ionosphere. The Earth was screaming, Japan was listening, everyone else was arguing on Twitter. Japan proved you could detect the electromagnetic signal days before the earthquake. They detected the criticality signal 3 to 7 days before Kumamoto. They just could not prove what the signal meant until after the ground started moving. 8 stations, real-time monitoring, 3 to 7 day advance warning, and they still cannot predict it reliably enough to evacuate a city. We know the warning exists, we can measure it, and we still cannot decode it fast enough to save anyone. We can see the future, we just cannot read it. Because there is a fatal flaw in the model. The ionosphere is constantly disturbed by solar wind, by lightning strikes, by power grid fluctuations. The electromagnetic environment is noisy. And separating the earthquake signal from the background chatter requires pattern recognition algorithms that do not exist yet. The Earth is screaming. We just can't hear it over the noise of literally everything else the planet does. You can detect the warning. You cannot decode it reliably. And that is the nightmare. The HAARP induction. Magnetometers successfully recorded an undeniable pattern of electromagnetic energy preceding the last 4 major earthquakes. The pattern is real. But the transmitter of the energy was not a facility in Alaska. The transmitter was the sun interacting with a critically stressed Earth. HAARP wasn't the villain. It was the witness. And we spent a decade calling it a liar, which means Frank Hugerbeets was not lucky. He was reading the signal. The Earth was broadcasting its structural failure into the atmosphere. The ionosphere was recording it. And the HAARP's instruments were sensitive enough to measure it. He just happened to be one of the only people actually paying attention to what the planet was saying. The conspiracy theorists were right about one thing. Someone knew the earthquakes were coming. It just was not the government. It was the planet. The planet has been screaming at us in electromagnetic frequencies for millions of years. We were just too busy fighting about who controlled the earthquake machine to realize we were standing on it. Japan proved we can detect the warnings. They just cannot decode it reliably enough to tell you whether you should evacuate or ignore it. The question is whether we will figure out the language before the next one hits. And based on the pattern, there will be a next one. The sun does not stop pulsing. The crust does not stop stressing. And HAARP's magnetometers will record it again. Because the show never ends. The sun and the earth have been at this for billions of years. We just finally bought tickets. And that is the thing about conspiracy theories. Sometimes the truth is weirder than the lie. The Earth and the Sun have been conspiring against us for billions of years. Not because they hate us, just because we happen to build our civilizations on top of a planetary stress fracture with a fusion reactor pointing at it. If this made you rethink everything you thought you knew about earthquakes, hit that like button. And share this with someone who still thinks conspiracy theories are always wrong. Because sometimes the truth is just weirder than the lie. The pattern is undeniable. We just do not know what to do with it yet. But at least we stopped blaming Alaska. For now, give it 6 months. Someone will find a new antenna to blame.